Speaker, first talk about the rules you put in place requiring the mask now to the suggestion. Why did you make that change?
We have had that as a policy basically throughout the interim. We've had to remind people a couple times that that is the policy, and they've complied once we have.
Talk about the reason for that and the safety protocols you put in place because of the pandemic.
Well, I think there are a couple reasons. Obviously, as we were able to develop some technology that would allow people to meet remotely, that gave people a better sense of safety for themselves. But also, if people weren't comfortable wearing masks, they had another option, just as they do now. If they're sitting in their office, then perfectly fine to not have a mask on. If they're in their office by themselves. The technology upgrades that we have made, you see some of them here in the committee rooms that allow for virtual participation. You didn't get to see much of it today because we only voted one time, but the members will be able to vote real time from their office. They're actually linked to the bill books on their desk, on their house desks. So it's just like they were there pushing a button. They do have to be on Capitol grounds in their office. The one exception to that is anybody that has tested positive or feels like they may have been exposed or quarantining. They still have to be on Capitol grounds, but they are going to be able to be in their cars in the parking lot.
Senate Bills 1, 2, and 3 will be bills dealing with the governor's executive powers. Can you tell us about House Bill 1, 2, and 3? What did you know about?
This we did file House Bills 1 through 5 today. And I'm going to defer to our lead sponsors on those to give you the rundown. House Bill 1 is an economic recovery bill. We'll turn that over to Bart Rowland.
Is it all right to take this off? Thank you, Speaker. House Bill 1 is the House Majority's attempt to provide clarity and reassurance to Kentucky's businesses and schools going forward that if they have a plan to stay open safely and to operate safely that meets or exceeds CD guidelines, they can do so. So basically we're saying that going forward, if you can do those things, Kentucky businesses, you don't have to worry about a third shutdown. There's 3 other sections inside the bill. One deals with waiving some interest and penalties on UI bills for employers that are accruing due to no fault of their own. The Section 3 deals with in-person, non-custodial parental visitation. And Speaker Pro Tem, if you want to talk about that, you can. That was a suggestion of his. And then Section 4 of the bill directs the Cabinet for Health and Family Services to create regs that would allow for compassionate care visits in nursing homes and residential care facilities under limited circumstances. Representative Mosier was key in this language, and I think she actually took language from a bill that the New York General Assembly passed this summer. So those are the 4 main points of House Bill 1.
Can you talk about the underlying reason? Talk about the underlying reason for that bill. Obviously, there's a feeling that some businesses were shut down that probably shouldn't have been shut down.
Yeah, I think it's the feeling of the entire House Majority Caucus, and quite frankly, a lot of our constituents that on a couple of occasions the administration far exceeded the recommendations that were put out by Dr. Fauci and the CDC. And he shut these businesses down. All summer long, the retail community, the restaurant community was begging for some clear guidance on when can we operate, when can we not operate, and why are certain businesses allowed to be open, and why are certain businesses forced to shut down. We're just going to say in this bill going forward, if you can meet or exceed the CDC guidelines, you can post a plan on your website, on your front door. Customers will decide if they're comfortable in visiting, and there's no more shutdowns.
Do you know the current CDC guidelines for schools and restaurants?
Yeah, we have those in the office, and Dr. Fauci, I think, most recently said, I saw an article today that there's no reason that schools should not be open.
And so when you have a kind of medical institution like CDC offering guidelines, it's not necessarily enforceable in some ways. It's kind of see the suggestions. So how do you really set a standard of following a set of suggestions when they're not written necessarily promulgated in the same way that orders or regulation?
I reached out over the past couple of weeks and talked to the Kentucky Medical Association, Hospital Association, different ones. I know there are different governing bodies out there, the CDC and maybe the AMA and different ones, and they all agreed that if we were to choose to set a kind of a gold standard for these guidelines, they all agreed that we could accurately use those CDC guidelines and recommendations.
So I guess my
In this
question is,
bill.
like Dr. Deborah Brooks came in when we had bars and restaurants probably open more than what the coronavirus task force would have recommended according to the CDC. And so would that then cause restaurants to have to follow restrictions that are more serious than what Kentucky is currently facing? Could this have the potential to backfire where the national problem is worse than Kentucky's problem and the standards end up being more severe than what the state was?
Well, we certainly would hope not, but we vetted all the organizations, and we intentionally used the CDC in the bill as the gold standard for us to go by.
Okay, we're gonna go to the next bill sponsor, just for the interest of time. Anyone wants interviews, we're clearly gonna help make that possible, and the bills will be heard in committee also.
House Bill 2 is a refiling of the bill that the governor vetoed last year, and is lead sponsor on that is Representative Fisher.
Thank you. House Bill 2 grants to the Attorney General the authority to enforce various abortion-related laws, such as those found in Chapter 216B and Chapter 311. Those sections require abortion facilities to be licensed, and they have transfer agreements with the local hospital in case of emergency. Chapter 311 requires abortion providers to obtain informed consent from the mother, parental consent from minors, and allows pregnant women to view an ultrasound before undergoing an abortion. As the speaker said, this bill passed 70 to 21 last session under House Bill 451, and we're presenting it again. The current governor has shown no interest in enforcing or defending these laws while he was Attorney General. He's already vetoed this bill once, and he has declared abortions to be essential medical services, which this bill would overturn. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. House Bill 3 is a judicial venue bill sponsored by Representative Massey.
Thank you. This is a venue bill, and what it will do is it will change the way we currently take matters that present as constitutional issues or administrative regulations, etc. And what will happen is, in the past, it would always go to the Franklin Circuit Court, where there's two judges that essentially decide all of those issues for the entire Commonwealth. The proposal in this bill is that we create 3 new districts that were based on population and geography. And basically what would happen is the case would be filed in the place of original jurisdiction. So to use my county as an example, if I would have a case, I would file it in Boone County, and then upon that filing, it would be certified to the Supreme Court Chief Justice, and he would randomly select a judge from each of the 3 districts. This would give an opportunity to have a greater bandwidth, if you will, of allowing our circuit judges, who are also well-trained in constitutional matters, to hear these cases. And it would be a panel of 3 as opposed to a single judge. After the decision, of course, it would still go through the appellate process the same way it had in the past. The other thing in this bill that's important to note is that it creates transparency for public access. These panels would be publicly accessible. We've also put a provision in there that nothing would be sealed unless it's required by state or federal law. And we believe that this just makes a more fair process. As a practicing attorney who's done this kind of work for many years, it gives you it gives you 2 more people to look at the case, and it gives you a large breadth of judicial experience to decide constitutional issues. And candidly, we think it reflects better for the voters of Kentucky who have elected these judges to serve at the trial level. Thank you.
Skip over House Bill 4 for a second, and House Bill 5 is a reorg bill sponsored by Representative Meredith.
House Bill 5 deals with the temporary reorganization of executive branch boards and agencies. It certainly was a needed thing to allow for temporary reorganizations when we were not having annual sessions in the early 2000s and prior. However, since then, I think what we have seen is these temporary reorganizations have been used as a way to push a political agenda of whoever those folks are in power in the executive branch, whether they be Republican, whether they be Democrat, whether they be current governors or past governors. If you look back over the last 5 governors, temporary reorganizations have been used to reorganize boards 446 times over those last 5 governors. And this just simply repeals the language allowing for those temporary reorganizations. Reorganizations can still be done. They just need to come before the General Assembly for a vote of the General Assembly to be done instead of being done by executive order by those executive branch officials. Thank you.
And House Bill 4 is a repeat of a bill that I filed last year. It's a constitutional amendment that would allow for, it would remove the calendar deadlines of our sessions. So in long sessions, it would remove the April 15th deadline, but in the short session, move the March 30 deadline. I have thought for years that this was an appropriate measure. I think that it's been particularly highlighted during this pandemic when last year or this past, in 2020, we didn't utilize 10 or 12 days of that session. And I think that everybody would acknowledge that we could have done some productive work had we been able to leave in March and come back with a better feel for what the budget was going to look like, a better feel for how the pandemic was going to progress, and I think we could have made much better decisions along the way, as opposed to having to rush several things by that April 15th deadline.
Does that also allow you to call in a special session?
Does not allow us to call in a special session. The governor would still have that authority to call us anytime that he felt appropriate. This would just allow us to as long as we bank days, to be able to reconvene, recess, for lack of a better term, even though we would adjourn, but then reconvene ourselves at a later date.
Why'd you move away from the calling the legislature back in such because I know that you've been mulling around that.
It was just an evolution of things, Daniel, and looking at what other states are doing, trying to figure out best practices. There are some, we didn't want to become a full-time legislature. That was not the intent of the framers of the Constitution. But we felt like that in today's world, it was more appropriate to spread those out for longer distances. When that initial decision was made, it was people had to travel to Frankfort, and they stayed in Frankfort. They didn't have the ability to commute back and forth. They didn't have the ability and flexibility that we have now. So I just think it's a better utilization of the legislative process.
And then really, these 5 bills are kind of being fast-tracked right now. Are you expecting to be able to pass all of them on Saturday, or are you going to go into next week? What's the timeline?
We haven't developed a complete schedule yet, but there is a potential that we will be here on Saturday.
Are you looking at changing the amount of days in a shortened session then? Because if you only have the number of days we have now, you'd be in for maybe 2 weeks if you're going to hold on to days where you can actually pass them.
Yes, I mean it is possible that we would not utilize it in a short session. We're not changing the number of days. By the majority assent, we can add up to 10 days total to the calendar, but we have to bank some days in order to do that.
Is there a possibility of going past Saturday in the next week for February?
There's a possibility, yes.
How many days possible?
I'm not sure yet. As I said, we haven't finished the calendar, or haven't decided on the final version of the calendar yet.
Are you viewing these as a block, 5 instead of 5 in the House, that you're going to pass all of them together at first before taking a break, or are you willing to pick and shoot, like, hey, this one we have more support for, we're going to pass this one first?
These are individual bills that would be dealt with individually. If they happen to all go together, they'll go together. If not, then they won't.
Do you feel a sense of urgency to get it out quickly, either as a message because of the way the election went, or because of the way Governor Beshear has governed
I think it's important to get in here and do work. There's obviously a lot that's going on right now. A lot of things that need to be addressed. And we have a very, very short time to address those things. I think you will see us take action on some budget issues before the end of the week, just so we can begin to utilize the interim, the recess, for development of the budget.
Mr. Speaker, just talking in general terms about the priority of trying to give the legislature more say in emergencies like the pandemic and that priority as far as you're concerned.
I do believe it's important. I think I'm a big believer that the more voices you have in a room, the better decisions you will make. May not change those decisions, but I think they become more thoughtful decisions when you have differing opinions, when you have dissenting opinions. I believe disagreement is a positive thing and helps to craft better policies and more productive policies.
What do you expect to see in the governor's budget address, and what do you want to see?
I just look forward to seeing what he has to propose. We will certainly consider that. Some of the things that I'm hearing, I believe that perhaps he is dealing with a different set of reality than we are, quite frankly. But I look forward to seeing his proposal. We will absolutely give it every bit of consideration. I do believe, just as an advance notice, I do believe that you will see us, when we first act on a budget, we will act in more of a continuation type of budget. And I want to caution everyone to not read anything into that. That is simply in order to get us into a conference situation where we can actually be working and doing productive work in a conference committee during the interim. There's nothing to be read into that at all.
Did I hear that you were the one who put into HB1 the belief that the supervised visits should continue to take place?
That was actually Representative Moser, or excuse me, Representative Mead. I was thinking hospital visits, but that was Representative Mead.
And I know we're running out of time. I'm just curious as to where she was at on that, and I guess she's not here. I thought she might was.
It was me that put that in. It was supervised visitations for court-ordered visitations for parents, biological parents of children who were in foster care was what that was for. And those are court orders that these folks, their children have come into care, and a lot of times that is for no other reason. They just didn't have the resources to be able to take care of their children at the time. And they tremendously love their children, want to see their children. And this was just because the cabinet had done a blanket policy of restricting all in-person visitations with those children. And we are saying that that's just not acceptable. I mean, if we were parents and we were in that same situation, we want to see our children. And I know it is for the protection of folks and their families, but I think we can do that on an individual basis rather than just a blanket policy.
Okay, last question.
Steve Rutherford, your comment on the governor's budget and reality, is there any specific you're talking about that you don't think it's going to be based on reality?
No, just some of the issues that I've heard that are going to be in there. But again, I have not seen the budget, so I'm not going to speculate on the exact details of it yet. But just some of the things that I have heard discussed as likely to be in there. But we'll wait and see what's going in there, or what he actually
What's
produces.
those issues that you heard?
All right, Joe, last question was last question.
All right, thank you all.